Welcome to episode number 10 of Uncovering Unexplained Mysteries for Wednesday, August 24th, 2016. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. Been getting a lot of stuff accomplished the last few days. Been very productive. So, I mean, yeah, I'm excited to be doing this again. Do you get annoyed when people call you Michael? Are you one of those guys that you only like the short?
I'd rather be called Mike because whenever, I'm reminded of Michael, I'm just reminded of my mom, whenever I did something like really bad.
Oh, yeah.
She'd always be like, Michael, get your ass in here. Like, oh, what did I do? I didn't do anything. And my mom's a really tall woman. So, yeah, that's, you definitely didn't want to get on her bad side. So,
yeah, before we get into all this again, I want to thank everybody for leaving the comments and everything on the iTunes. One thing I did want to mention, though, because we got one, this isn't going to be all the time. I'm not always going to address every single damn comment we get anywhere, but something I did want to point out, and I feel the need to point this out every now and then. This is a show that's mainly about the show Unsolved Mysteries. I mean, yes, we do talk about the segments of like paranormal and cryptozoological and ghosts and all that, but it's not really a show that's like delving into these mysteries on their own. We're more or less commenting on the segments of Unsolved Mysteries and kind of giving our personal recollections and thoughts on what the segment presents. Because someone was wanting us to clarify about the Black Dahlia murder, about how Elizabeth Short was actually a hermaphrodite, and she wasn't, basically the show had kind of portrayed her in the wrong kind of light, and how she wasn't trying to chase fame. She ran away from her parents because her parents would have never understood about her being a hermaphrodite back in like the 20s or 30s or whenever it happened. But yeah, the whole thing is like the show never brought that up. The show never talked about that, so that's why we didn't really talk about it, because it's kind of like we're sticking to the show and what the show... we're like I said.
Sometimes we go in and look at and some extra research, but that's only if it's listed on some of the sources that we are using. I'm using the Unsolved Mysteries website and the Unsolved Mysteries Wikia. So if that type of information is not included there, I probably won't mention it. But also, we have a limited amount of time. We don't want this to be a 3-hour-long show.
Right.
So, so sometimes, we might talk about certain things that not as in depth as you might like, but that's just how it is.
Man, it's not that we were afraid to like not go there or whatever. I mean, I would have went there. I just, it was kind of news to me when I first heard about that. So.
Oh yeah, me too. If they didn't mention it, then I didn't know. We didn't really know about it because we're just going off of the stuff that we heard on Unsolved Mysteries. But there's one particular case in this episode that there's some extra stuff that I will talk about.
Right. I mean, I personally felt like it was worth mentioning as well. So, I mean,
yeah.
But also, like, another thing I wanted to clarify is that, like, these episodes are broken down into kind of random segments. So one segment will be a ghost, one segment will be UFO, one segment will be bizarre murder. Yeah, that's how Unsolved Mysteries did it. You never watched an episode of Unsolved Mysteries and it's like, all right, tonight we're just talking about bizarre murders and tomorrow we're just talking about UFOs. No, they mixed it up and I loved that. Like in one episode,
I think they had one UFO special, once.
Yeah, so like in one episode of Unsolved Mysteries, you got like 4 completely different stories, and I fucking loved that. That was great. It's like a
That's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to be a bit eclectic, or try to have more of a variety. And the way to do that is to have more the type of format that we have here. So some people might want to hear, about bizarre murders, or other people want to hear about mysterious legend or the unexplained. And so we want to provide that opportunity for, whoever is listening. And also it's more fun that way to focus on different stuff and to have a variety of topics to talk about in one show. Because if we just talked about just UFOs or just bizarre murder, you'd get burned out eventually.
Yeah, exactly. So with all that being said, yesterday I did make a fan page for the Uncovering Unsolved Mysteries podcast on Facebook. So now you should be able to look us up on Facebook. I think Facebook's kind of weird with how they work with everything. I think you either need a certain amount of likes or you need to be on the page in existence for a certain period of time before you turn up in the search results. But yeah, I mean, just keep checking back. That's probably the best way to equally reach both of us. YouTube's a decent way, but I think that's a lot of Mike's people since they're uploaded on his channel. So if you comment on the Facebook page, then we'll both see it. Well, I need to make Mike an administrator on that page. That reminds me. But yeah, so you can like it, and that's the easiest way to connect with us, probably. Give us suggestions and all that kind of stuff. And as some of you well know, we do take your suggestions because we've covered quite a few of people's suggestions already. So with all that being said, the first segment that we're going to talk about this week is Pike's Peak Bigfoot. This is one that Mike chose. Mike wanted to talk about big, hairy, human-looking things.
Well, we talked about the Oregon Bigfoot already, and this is before I even saw the Oregon Bigfoot segment. This is the first one that I saw. I don't. It made an impact on me because I didn't see this at a young age or anything. It's just when I found the season segments from where online where we found them, that one really stood out to me. And I think it was because I think it was actually really well put together for the most part. It is really short, so I do agree that there could have been a little bit more there, but it also was the first season, so I could kind of see why it's not as in-depth as some of the other ones were. But at the same time, there was still enough there for it to leave an impact on me. In particular, the sketches of the Bigfoot, the sequence where the Bigfoot runs across the street and then runs by this person's home in the snow. It's a really well shot sequence. The practical effect of the guy in the Bigfoot suit looks really great as well. Plus, I also liked the whole sort of thing where the Bigfoot sort of ransacked somebody's house and then left behind some fur, and then there's this other guy, this scientist guy, analyzed it and pretty much came to the conclusion that it has to be some sort of ape, which is definitely one of those light bulb moments, or one of those big moments where like, whoa, this is big, this is huge, but who knows? Bigfoot has been kind of, a lot of people believe it's hoax, and I can see why. I think the Patterson video, I think even Richard Patterson himself came out a while back, and he said that it was a fake before he passed away, if I remember correctly.
Now, what's the Richard Patterson video for those who may not know?
Richard Patterson, do you not know what that is?
Is that the famous one that's like...
That's the famous one.
Okay, that of him walking, the Bigfoot walking through the woods and people... Yeah. Okay.
I remember reading that somewhere. I could be wrong, but I remember reading something where before he passed away, like he said to somebody or a friend of his or whatever that it was a fake. It was all phony. It wasn't real.
These people are fucking dicks. All these like fakers, like with the crop circles and the Bigfoot fakings.
The Loch Ness monster. Yeah.
It just seeks to just fuck up the credibility of the legitimate ones, which I mean, we know with crop circle. Which, God, I can't believe we haven't done a crop circle segment yet. There's so many legitimate ones out there that couldn't. It's like the real McCoys from the fake ones. I mean, sometimes it's harder to tell right out of the gate, but I mean, especially with
I gotta admit, Patterson did a great job, so, and with the Loch Ness Monster, the infamous photo that everybody, attributed to being an actual picture of Nessie, that was just some toy submarine with like an inflatable sort of thing on top of it. So it was all... they had it set up. They shot on a black and white camera, and Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Wow.
That story.
This Pike's Peak one, you know, I have the Ultimate box set collection. I've seen every single one of those episodes probably 30 plus times each. So I was very acquainted with the Oregon Bigfoot segment that we've talked about earlier.
And that's a great segment. I mean, when I look back at it, I could probably say that is a better segment. It's just this was the first one that I saw, so it left a little bit more of an impact.
Yeah,
because I didn't really watch the Mysterious Legends set.
And I mean, I get that, but with that being said, I did think this was the much weaker of the two. There wasn't a whole lot of meat on this segment. There were some kind of cool things, but I mean, with the Oregon one, I guess the scene that made it for me was the guy who was staking some land, who actually saw the Bigfoot and it chased him through the woods. And like, I think by that time, Unsolved Mysteries had gotten really, really good with their kind of cinematography and their that
was a great sequence. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a great sequence. And I believe the actual witness reenacted the segment, so it was like the actual guy and not some guy who looked completely different, which is always nice when they can do that. And that actually happened in another segment we're going to talk about with Diane Labenek. But yeah, so basically, Pike's Peak is a sanctuary for mountain lions and bobcats, etc. But recently, as of when this segment was shot, it has been to believe to be. Wow, that's kind of a fucked up sentence. Basically, there's some Bigfoot living in Pike's Peak, y'all. That's what you need to know. Okay. For hundreds of years, strange ape-like creatures have been seen across the western United States. The Indians called them Sasquatch, which I did not know that. I always heard the term Sasquatch, but I did not know that was a Indian or Native American terminology. Today,
I remember the Sasquatch was used as sort of a tale, to tell kids, hey, you better not misbehave, or the Sasquatch is gonna get you. So that was kind of an interesting thing.
Well, that is in the area that you do live at, Mike. So I would imagine people did tell you those things growing up, but I never heard that growing up.
No, I was talking about the Native Americans. That was in their culture. They'd say things like the better behave, or the Sasquatch.
Mike, I'm asking you where you're hiding Bigfoot. Just tell me. I know. I know you know. I know you know more than what you're letting on to. You live in Vancouver, Washington. You have answers.
If I did, I wouldn't tell you.
Bastard. But yeah, I'd be like, this segment kind of says stuff that has been said many a times. Many share the belief that these are misidentifications of other animals, but today there are a lot of people who have actually...
It was technically the first Bigfoot segment on the show, so...
Yeah, it was, which is cool. So it all begins the morning of March 27, 1987. Dan Messias and his son discovered some mysterious tracks in the snow. This part I thought was pretty cool. His son, they discovered some mysterious tracks in the snow, and Dan had spent much of his life outdoors, but he did not recognize these particular tracks. The next night, on a hunch, they stayed up late downstairs watching TV, and every 15 or 20 minutes or so, he'd go to his window, and because I guess they heard a noise out there, and a few seconds later, he saw some large creatures running down the road. There was a small one around 5'7", and the other one looked like it was about 6 foot to 6'2". Other than the hair covering their entire bodies, they looked just like humans. The next day, Dan took pics of the tracks, and the large set measured about 1 foot long, which is pretty fucking crazy for a non-human foot. And then the smaller one was about 8 inches in length. Then Von Langen, an animal physiologist, believes that these plaster replicas that he had, because they cut to this guy's office or whatever, he had these plastic replicas, and he believed that they fit the print made by the tracks. The print itself did not fall into any category of grizzly bear classification or anything like that. It's a primate foot. I mean, there's no doubt. It's a foot of a primate. A bipedal, non-hominoid, whatever.
Well, it could be semi-hominoid. If you think about it, I mean, if it's walking upright, it could be part human.
Well, that's always been the whole thing about Bigfoot, is it's the missing link, and that's why some people are so eager to find it, so they can kind of prove the whole evolution thing that much more correct, or whatever side of that you fall on. So in 1978, well, actually, Dan Messias's nocturnal sightings was featured in a number of papers, and then he was contacted by a bunch of people who had also witnessed similar sightings. In 1978, Jeremy Swisher came into contact with one of these creatures in Pikes Peak. He saw what looked like an individual, and then when he turned around, it came towards them, and it started to chase them. He was saying it was a fairly good-sized looking man, but it was covered in hair, about 6 foot tall. The run was more or less like an athlete. He was right across the road from them, and it scared them off, so they ran away from this thing. For years, eyewitnesses have claimed to see creatures like Bigfoot.
Was that the one at Pikes Peak?
Yeah, that was one that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. That is an example of a reenactment that was pretty lazy.
Yeah.
It's like you had the Bigfoot suit for the one segment, but you couldn't have a guy in the suit for this segment. I mean, I wouldn't really think it would cost that much extra to have the guy in the Bigfoot suit around at Pikes Peak, and then like it hiding in the bushes somewhere or across the street, and then across the road, have the reenactors like look at it, like, oh my god, and then run away. But apparently not.
How you just delivered that line reminded me of that one movie with that famous quote. He ate them, and now he's gonna eat me.
Yeah, he's like, oh my god.
Oh my god. Yes. What movie was that from? I know you know.
It's called Troll 2. It's one of the best so bad it's good movies ever made.
I gotta watch that one. I haven't seen that one.
There's more than just one scene like that that's so bad it's good, though. I mean, there's other stuff that's really just hilarious.
Yeah, you guys gotta go and look up that clip that we're talking about from Troll 2, whoever. He was like, he ate them, and then they're gonna eat me. Just how he... Like, how would the director be okay with that? Like, yep, sounds good. Put it in the can. Good day's work there, you know? Like, what the fuck?
Oh, my God.
Mike, man, there's so much passion how you delivered that. I think you have a career in acting. So, for years, eyewitnesses have claimed to see a creature like Bigfoot, specifically in the Pacific Northwest. That's why I feel like Mike has more information than what he's laying on. It wasn't a bear or anything like he'd seen before. This is an anonymous witness saying this. He stayed at a good distance, and he seemed to have a figure of a human, except hair everywhere on its body, so we're noticing a theme here. In early August of 1988, as Mike was saying earlier, a cabin was broken into by a large animal.
Well, the one before that, I think, was the one, the anonymous guy was the one where the Bigfoot... Was that the one where you actually saw a guy in a Bigfoot suit unnaturally walking across the street and then running? Yeah. I wish I could show footage from that, but no, I can't, so...
Yeah.
You'd have to put the image in your brain, folks.
Just picture somebody in a Bigfoot suit. Everyone's got a mental image of that, especially given movies like Harry and the Hendersons. Like, yeah, everyone's got a Bigfoot. That's an underrated movie, I feel like.
Or the Jack Link's beef jerky.
More recent reference. Yeah, that's a good example. So in early August of 1988, the year that I was born, it was a month before I came into the world. Cabin was broken into by a large animal. The cabin door sustained considerable damage, and then the next morning, 2 boys found tufts of hair in the screen door. Now, this is not the first example or the first time that we've gotten hair samples like this, because in the Skunk Ape episode, the Bigfoot of the Everglades, as he's called, Skunk Ape, they found tufts of hair on branches that were way too high for any normal animal to leave.
Yeah.
So,
well, it probably technically was the first time because this was the first Bigfoot segment.
Well, I was just saying for the show in general. And those were analyzed too, and they ruled out like hairs that would be used in a synthetic costume for the skunk ape one. But what was annoying is they never followed it up, because they said we'll get the result. The results are being developed right now, and we'll get them to you as soon as we have them. And then obviously, you know, that was years ago, and you know, who knows what the results came back as. Which the Unsolved Mysteries will leave you on a cliffhanger every now and then. I mean, aside from the mystery generally being unsolved.
Yeah. Not very often though, which is nice, but when it does stuff like that, it is kind of frustrating, especially when like, oh, we'll get back to it and we'll have more information, and then like there isn't any more information.
Right.
There's no update.
There is no more Funyuns. I don't know. That was a reference to my last video that I made that nobody saw. So Unsolved Mysteries sent the hair to a lab, University of California to be exact. They tested it for animals like deer and bear, and it only reacted to primates, as Mike was saying earlier. It eliminated all primates except for humans and chimpanzees. And the guy was saying, he's like, it's hard to see how this type of animal has been able to evade capture for hundreds of years. Which, again, kind of goes back to what we talked about in the Oregon one. It's like, you know, it's just, we don't know. I mean, it's
maybe it's smarter than we think it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's like kind of one of those things, like back in the 80s and 90s, the stuff was like a lot more viable to kind of accept that it, you know, maybe this was out there and it was just, you know, whatever. But now
that's kind of like what we were saying, where, you know, if it was out there, it probably isn't alive anymore. So that's a big thing. No wonder we're not seeing anything, because it probably isn't around.
Right, because, you know, it'd have to mate, you know, there'd have to be a female and a male, and they'd have to mate, and they'd have to have babies, and it's like, you know, it just seems...
Well, with this particular one, it does seem there's a little bit of a reference to that there might be a smaller one. But,
right, yeah, that's true, because they were saying the 5'7", but that might have been the female as well, but, you know, who knows, it could have been...
I think there's also a segment of sightings that had something like that, too. I remember something with, like, a baby Bigfoots or something. Like, this guy he was hiking the Pacific Northwest somewhere, and he came across, you know, a Bigfoot, like... nest or something, like a bunch of Bigfoots. So we came across, like, these babies... And then the mother, like, saw that this fucking guy was hanging around her kids and just fucking chased after him. It's probably bullshit, but it is kind of funny to think about, really.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say on this particular one. I guess this one was going to...
I don't either.
It was going to be
it was a short one. It was a short one, but I wanted to mention it because I think that somebody did sort of name drop it on one of my YouTube comments. And also I wanted to mention it too, since it was technically the first Bigfoot segment on the show that I remember seeing. So there are some things about it that are really nice to see. The artist renderings of what the Bigfoot looked like and some of the reenactments. But yeah, I would say the Oregon Bigfoot is probably better, and maybe even the Yeti. Because you have the whole story of the guy going up to the mountains and then finding some Yeti paw and then sort of doing a switcheroo like Indiana Jones or something.
Yeah, that one was a really good one as well. Skunk Ape is actually really good too. If you haven't seen that one yet, you should check that one out. Because that's actually in my stomping grounds here in Florida. So Skunk Ape, check it out, Everglades. So I'm flipping the script. I know I wanted to talk about the one, but I'm going to talk about this other one instead just because I'm feeling it more right now. This next segment we're moving on to is Cynthia Anderson, or what I like to call I Love You, Cynthia, is what stood out to me a little bit.
Yeah.
I liked this one. This was, I believe this was Mike's pick, and this is actually one of the handful of segments that I remembered from seeing as a kid. Like
Is that one on set?
No, it is not. Unfortunately,
that doesn't make any sense. That should have been on the Bizarre Murders set.
Yeah, I mean solely for the wall graffiti alone.
Well, and also the fact that she had these dreams, so that ties into it too. So
yeah, this is one I remember as a kid because there's a scene in the segment where the guy who's suspected of kidnapping this woman writes, "I love you, Cindy," on this wall across the street at a strip mall from where she was working, and she's had to see it like every day for 6 months. And they covered it up, but then it came back again, and it was signed by GW, and they were thinking maybe GW was her kidnapper. But yeah, I liked this one a lot. I've kind of forgotten about it. You know, a lot of times just mentioning the name of the segment, it's hard for me to recall it right off the bat. But then when you told me about the whole "I love you, Cynthia" thing, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this one. This is a really good one. So in 1980, 20-year-old Cynthia. Whatever.
She's also known as Cindy, so
okay.
Either way,
I thought I knew my brain wasn't that stupid when I write notes. 20-year-old Cynthia Anderson was plagued by vivid dreams. In one episode, Cindy recognized the man at the door and let him in. In the middle of the dream, her trust was betrayed. Cindy became increasingly tormented by these dreams. So she's having these dreams that this guy's tormenting her, which is fucking weird that someone would be having these kind of dreams to begin with. I mean,
that's what people think. There might have been some sort of psychic connection. Maybe these dreams were warning her of something that might happen in her future. The dream sequences themselves were also really well shot, well lit, efficiently creepy and nightmarish.
Didn't they have that like ghosting effect on everything, where everything kind of left trails and stuff? Like, yeah, that's used a lot in Unsolved Mysteries for sure. But it does convey dreamlike, you know, sentiments.
Dreamlike qualities, yeah.
So Cindy was talking to her mom about the dreams, and her sister overheard them talking. Her sister believed the dreams could have been a premonition. The nightmares lasted for a year. Then on August 4th, 1981, she became employed as a legal secretary. Every time she would go into the office, she arrived before the attorneys that she worked for arrived. She'd always keep the door locked, and because of her paranoia, I guess stemming from these dreams, she also had a buzzer installed on her desk, which I'm guessing was some kind of silent alarm.
Yeah, so she could alert the shop next door if there was any trouble.
Yeah. So at noon, Jim Rabbit and Jay Felstein, her attorney bosses, had arrived back at the office. The lights were on, the door was locked, they went in, they yelled for Cindy, no answer. The phones hadn't been placed on hold, which they normally would have been if Cindy had left, you know, officially. And strangely enough, Cindy had left her romance novel open to the only violent scene in the book when the heroine was held at knife point. The attorneys had a sickening feeling that something was wrong.
Yeah, that really stood out to me. Just the whole sort of coincidence. And that's what it probably was. It was just pure coincidence.
Yeah, I would think so.
That's still creepy, though. I mean, that's still something that is definitely pretty unsettling, though. The whole thing where it makes for good TV and a good story.
Yeah.
And it's even better that it's actually real.
Right.
So it wasn't some scene in a romance novel, for instance.
Yeah, there was no way Unsolved Mysteries was going to leave that detail out. So after that, Cindy was never heard from or seen again. No farewell letter, no hint, no nothing.
Although I gotta say, why is that a romance novel if there's a scene where the hero gets abducted at knife point?
You're asking this question when one of the number one selling books was 15 Shades of Grey, where it's basically... 50
Shades of Grey.
Oh, okay.
That's not enough shades of gray, Josh.
Yeah, that's actually a plausible amount of shades of gray. 15 is enough to work with. 50 is a little bit more excessive. I'm sorry. A manageable amount of shades of gray by Josh Cannon. So yeah, Cindy wasn't heard from after that. She just basically up and disappeared from the attorney's office, and for 8 years it baffled the police and Cindy's family. They felt perhaps maybe she was suffering from amnesia, which I want to point out right now. That's another trope or commonality that you notice in this show, and I wouldn't say it's a trope actually. I would just say it's something that you notice a lot in this show is amnesia. That is something. And I guess when I had the box set, I kind of forgot just how much they talked about amnesia on this show.
Well, there actually are there actually are particular segments that are devoted to amnesia cases.
Right.
So I do find those to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, they usually are. And I mean, I understand why the box set left them out, because it's not like the creme de la creme of the Unsolved Mysteries crop. But
I still think they're interesting.
Yeah, but it does. Not only does it happen a lot on this show where people get hit in the head and they forget, or they just forget for no apparent reason,
or they forget because of stress or some sort of situation in their life that's just too traumatic for them. So it ends up causing amnesia. Amnesia is I particularly find amnesia very fascinating because it is one of the very kind of unexplained sort of things that happens with the human brain. It's one of those, like, what triggers it? It could just be like a bump on the head, and it might not even be that serious of a bump on the head, but because you hit a certain part of your brain, then it gives you amnesia. Or, it's caused by some sort of stress or some sort of secret or something, or that you've been holding back in your life or whatever, and then it just comes to a head in the worst way and then completely just wipes your memory. It's fascinating and tragic at the same time, because it seems like a lot of these amnesia cases that I've seen featured on the show, even if these individuals are found, they do not remember who they are.
Right. And it's ruined marriages, and it's ruined relationships with children. I mean, I was watching this one where this woman just had a aneurysm in her brain, and it just destroyed her memory. And it kind of gave her a little bit of brain damage, too, because she'd randomly, like, walk off.
Is that the woman who thought she was still in her 20s or something? She thinks she's living in the 50s or whatever, or the 70s. She thinks she's living in the 70s, but really it's like the 80s or whatever, the 60s, I think, or something like that. She thinks she's in her 20s, but actually she's like close to 50 or whatever.
No, it's not that one, but that one sounds interesting as hell. What's going on?
I think that was season... I gotta look that up again. That was one of the more recent seasons I saw. So either season 4 or 3. I think it might be season 3. I don't know.
The one I was talking about is that this chick had an aneurysm in her brain, and when she recovered from it, she didn't remember anybody, even her own kids, and her kids, like, meant nothing to her. Like, her aunt or her sister took her kids up to the hospital, and they're like, "Look at mommy," and the kids are like, happy that their mom wasn't dead, but the mom was just looking at them going, who are these people? And she had, like, no connection to the kids anymore, because it's like instant Alzheimer's. Like,
I mean, let's think about that. Think about that from the perspective of the person who's dealing with that. They don't know that they've lost their identity or who they are, but it's terrifying for us to think about that if that happened to us. I mean, it was just one of those wow, like everything that you work for, all these memories, all these things that you take for granted, you could lose them, and then now you're just some different person, and it's very terrifying, and it's more of a real horror that's something like a UFO abduction or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with the psychological, that's a whole nother level of horrific things that can happen. I mean, maybe not the most horrific, but it's definitely...
there are some horrific things that happen that ties into a later segment we'll discuss on this particular episode.
Yeah. So, Cindy was not suffering from amnesia, though.
No, absolutely not.
Unfortunately.
But it was interesting to talk about.
Yeah, they thought that it was a possibility, and I just wanted to mention how that's thrown out a lot in this show, that theme. So, a little background. Cindy was raised in a strict religious environment. They were all devout Christian fundamentalists. Quote, she was an obedient, quiet girl, lots of friends, a type of daughter that you just enjoy. And that's what her dad said about her. So Cindy was looking forward to quitting her job in 2 weeks and going to Bible college with her boyfriend. Before she disappeared, though, she was spending a lot of time on her face and her clothes and her look. And the day Cindy vanished, police searched for clues, could not find her car keys or purse. No sign of a struggle. Her bank account was never touched. Her social security never turned up at another place. 10 months earlier, Cindy noticed an odd coincidence. Someone had painted the words "I love you, Cindy" on the wall across the street from her office. No one named Cindy worked at the offices across the street at the strip mall, and the sign was visible for 6 months and then covered up. Within weeks, the message reappeared, even larger in the same place, "I love you, Cindy" by GW. That definitely stood out to me, that scene with the big "I love you, Cindy." I mean, because think about that. Like, if you, like, I mean, I guess it's kind of less creepy. Or...
What if they're... Well, it still would be creepy if you were... If you're a guy. I mean, it'd be creepy for anybody. I mean, can you imagine this, Josh? Outside the, place where you do karaoke, somebody spray paints. Yeah. I love Josh.
Mainly,
I love you, Josh.
Mainly because, like, I'm afraid of other guys, because the male species is the violent race. They're the obsessive, kind of more violent race.
Well, there's women too who are violent.
Wait, I just said race. I meant to say gender. Yeah, there's women, there are women who are violent. I mean, there's an old show on the Investigation Discovery Channel called Deadly Women and all that, and it was or Snapped. Snapped was another good show on Investigation Discovery that only dealt with women killers, which I thought was a great concept for a show, and it was very interesting. But for the most part, like 90% of the time, it's guys. So yeah, I would be creeped out only because I would think that it was a guy stalker who became obsessed with me or whatever, because that shit does happen, especially when you're online and you put yourself out there to millions of anonymous people.
One of your karaoke fans.
Yeah, man. Karaoke fans. God, that's such an oxymoron, a karaoke fan, because karaoke's so awful. So yeah, anyway, among the people that were investigated with the initials GW was the maintenance man who worked at the law firm for some time. He had the keys to all the offices. He had the initials GW, obviously, but they found no evidence that he wrote the graffiti or had anything to do.
Well, apparently, I have a little update on that. Oh. So that's why I didn't interject for a bit. Sorry, folks. So I know some people don't like that.
I love it.
But anyway... the person who wrote the spray painted message has since been identified and is not believed to have any connection with the case. Jose Rodriguez Jr. is a suspect in the case and was one of the 9 people indicted on the drug charges, which we'll get to later. But, yeah. So I guess he was the guy who wrote the message.
Oh, so the puzzle pieces. So now we earn the title of the show because we are uncovering this unsolved mystery, because this unsolved mystery left you hanging. But as we've done our research, we're finding out kind of a theme here, which we will get to at the end. So the day before Cynthia disappeared, there was a man who went to the office to pay a legal fee. And he had noticed that she kept receiving these calls, and the caller would call and either say something or whatever, and she would quickly hang up. And the guy said the look on her face, she was scared. And he says, it gives me shivers to this day to remember the look on her face. I mean, it bothered this guy so much that he went home and he called the police and asked them to do a drive-by and check on her. This guy just knew that there was something going on with this woman at this office. So then, September of 1981, a few months after Cynthia disappeared, someone called the police department. The lady said she was scared, and she was talking in a low, whisper-like voice. She said Cindy was being held in a basement in a white house. Then she called back and then hung up again. At some point on the call, she mentioned that there were 2 houses side by side owned by the same family, and the family was out of town, but their son, however, was home, and he was the party holding Cindy hostage in the basement. So the cops went out and started searching all over the place, and it was just impossible for them to get a positive location.
Yeah.
Because, dude, a fucking white house, 2 white houses side by side. I mean, Jesus, like, how many... talk about not narrowing it down at all. Like, I don't... And this is another thing that I've noticed about
That's why show. I don't even know if that's true. It could have been just some person just pranking the cops. It's some people do that. You
Right,
know,
but, like-
they see a popular news story and they see an opportunity to kind of mess with the police.
And that's what it's got to be, because like so many times in this show you get you get these tipsters who'll call in, and the tips that they leave, it's like, motherfucker, why did you even call in if you're going to give me such vague ass information? I would rather have nothing than what you provided, because all you've done is get my hopes up that something's going to happen, but you left me no key to unlock that door. So it's basically like I have no information at all with what little information you gave me.
Well, that's bad too, but the people who have what seems to be credible information and then it turns out to be BS is just about as bad, if you ask me.
Yeah, but those people, a lot of them just feel like they're helping out, and they just, you know, a lot of people are busybodies and they want to stick their head where it doesn't belong, and they, well...
Not the person with that one case, I forgot what it was called, but there's this one case where this woman disappeared or whatever, and there was a call that came in and says, I'm such and such, or whatever. I can't talk too much, though, because... You know, blah, blah, blah. And then you find out later that woman's dead. So it hasn't been dead for a long time. So...
Oh, yeah, I know what case you're talking about. It came out of, like, Colorado or something. Like,
yeah.
It was, like miles and miles away.
So that kind of... That's what I'm talking about. That kind of BS. Where it's like, I'm such and such who's missing. But really... You're not. So it's one of those, like, what the fuck is wrong with that person?
To me, when I picture bogus tips... I picture some old granny in her house who, like, is always watching everyone's business, who's very gossipy, and she almost, like, and I've heard about this from one of my friends. My friend worked with this older lady that worked at Walmart, and she would have a police scanner in her house just so she could listen to, like, what was going on, just so she could eavesdrop, basically. And she also kept her walkie-talkie on from Walmart just so she could hear, like, I guess she lived close enough to Walmart to where it still got reception, to where she could hear what the employees were saying to each other and shit. Like, so in my mind,
that's just fucked up,
dude. It's people who don't have a fucking life. It's older people who don't have a fucking life. I mean, I guess younger people cannot have a life too, but I mean, it's older people who don't.
Well,
have
it's like an older version of Corey Feldman's character from Gremlins. You know, the one where he's calling and tells about the gremlins. It's like, oh, yeah, like, remember, you know, Chunk. It's like Chunk. Remember when Chunk in the Goonies is calling? It's like, oh, yeah, like those creatures that you pour water on them and they multiply. It's like, no, it's true.
Yeah, it's just like, I guess these people mean well, or maybe they just want to add excitement to their own life, but man, I feel bad for police investigators in these situations because they just bog the fucking line up with bullshit.
Yeah.
And muddy the waters more.
And waste their time. And they could go out and look up on these leads, and they're bullshit, and then that really affects other cases where they could spend time actually looking up real legitimate leads. And
that's like anytime there's like a car accident or anything like that, it seems like there's always that one person who feels compelled to like come up to the cops and like tell them what they saw, and it's like not important information at all that they're conveying, and it's like they just want to be a part of it. Like, God, those people annoy me. Those are the same people who will slow their car down to 10 miles an hour on the highway to look at an accident.
Oh, I hate that.
God, I hate those fuckers. Fucking rubbernecks, man.
That's why you have traffic in these accidents.
Dude, in Jacksonville, Florida, that's why you have traffic. Good God, man. That's because people apparently don't know how to drive out here. Like, they just came to this country off from some third world country. I don't know what the excuse is, but no one knows how to drive out here, so it's inevitable that an accident will happen every fucking day, and it's inevitable that everybody has to like slow down to a stop to look at it and take pictures and poke the people and be like, hey, look, you all right there, buddy?
Take a selfie.
Yeah, exactly. Take a selfie with the person, like, wow, look at me, something interesting happened in my shitty 9-to-5 life for once. At the expense of somebody else's pain and suffering.
Some terrible, just asshole taking a selfie with a goofy grin on his face behind some car that's wrecked and somebody's knocked unconscious in the background.
That actually did happen in this in Jacksonville. There was a firefighter who took a selfie or took pictures of some decapitated body or something in some car wreck.
That's just fucked up.
Yeah, and he got fired. He got fired because it got on the news because the pictures started circulating around the internet, and the parents were really pissed off. They're like, "Dude, that's
I can see why.
yeah, it's like completely disrespectful to our daughter." Yeah. So anyway, got off rabbit trail on that one, but so the police weren't able to find anything, because they were given such weak leads on that phone call. They couldn't get a positive location on the house. Then we get the big old update. Of course, the segment ends with, the parents going, "We wish we could find her," yada, yada, yada. Then they update on the show. They say in November 95, a federal grand jury handed down indictments of 9 individuals for involvement in some kind of drug ring. Richard Miller, who was one of Cynthia Anderson's employers, was involved in the indictment, and it was thought that Cindy was killed because she overheard Miller discussing details of their drug ring at the office.
Yeah, I do believe that theory because it ties in with what the guy saw. He saw her, terrified on the phone. I mean, that ties into it really well. The whole thing that it would explain why she was so scared.
Yeah,
because it's like,
the guy, knew that she overheard it, and so, either he disguised his voice or maybe he didn't disguise his voice, and he called and said, "Look, bitch, if you open your mouth, I'll kill you and your whole family," or something, along those lines. I've never made one of those calls before. Sorry if that sounded too realistic just then. I actually call Mike every Monday with that same threat, but it's about doing this podcast. But then, according to the Unsolved Wikia, the person who wrote, as you said, it was that Jose Rodriguez Jr., and he was a suspect in the case. He was one of the 9 people indicted on the drug charges. In 95, while he was on trial for drug charges, a witness testified that he had confessed to killing Cindy. However, police could not confirm this confession, and her case apparently still remains unsolved, although she is most likely dead, and it was most likely because of that scenario, the aforementioned scenario. And just as kind of another sad side note, her father passed away in 2008. So
yeah, that's too bad. May rest in peace. But I don't want. I did find it kind of strange, this whole thing where he's talking about, she was dressing up and putting makeup on and didn't eat breakfast because of it, so she was becoming a debutante.
Yeah, I don't know what that has to do with anything, honestly.
It was just like, so just because your daughter decides to look nice and dress nice, she's like some kind of slut now, apparently. That's kind of messed up, but that's what it is.
Well, I could imagine.
Hopefully, they're reunited in the great beyond. Father,
yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to laugh at that, but I couldn't imagine it was too much fun living with a family of Christian fundamentalists. Because I grew up as a Christian, although I consider myself non-religious now. But Christian fundamentalists, those are like the Orthodox Jews. Those are people who really are like hardcore into the teachings of the Bible, and sometimes specifically the Old Testament, which is kind of the dark ages of that Christianity with the
if you ask me, the Old Testament should be tossed out completely. It's just not relatable to modern people,
right?
At all in any way. But that's just me. For me personally, I'm not very religious either. I used to be, but only because my dad was, and so I just kind of tagged along type deal.
Right.
But it's just after reading about all this kind of stuff, the evangelists scamming people for money, the whole sort of history of the Crusades, and all this sort of stuff where a lot of these Christians, tend to just act like, evolution isn't real or whatever, and all that ridiculousness, and then saying things like, all these there's only one God, and then I'm like, well, there were many, many other gods before the Christian God, but apparently none of that matters according to them, because that none of that is just bullshit or whatever. So, it's in my opinion, believe what you want to believe, but don't force me. Right. To try to believe what you want to believe. There's a lot of people who are the main problems with organized religion. The religion itself isn't the problem to me. It's the organized part of it that's the issue for me personally.
Right. Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. proselytizing is never a cool thing as far as I'm concerned.
They're gonna go to hell.
Yeah, and I mean, dude, I live in the Bible Belt. Like, you have no idea. It is.
You're watching these murder shows and this Unsolved Mysteries. You're going to hell.
Well, no, that's okay. Like, murdering isn't so bad. It's if you want to, marry somebody who's of the same gender, that's when you're going to hell. They pick and choose what you're going to hell for, like gambling and gluttony, like overeating and being.
Well, murder still is, I think, because that's one of the deadly sins.
Yeah, but it's not as bad as being a homosexual in the South. I don't know. We if we haven't lost a quarter of our fan base after this episode, I will be surprised. But hey, we're going there, lady. The lady who wanted us to go there, we're going there now. So I hope you're happy about that. I'm assuming she was a lady.
I'm just being honest. That's all. I'd rather be honest than bullshit people around. So
yeah, we don't have any sponsors or anything that anybody
believe what you want to believe. That's fine with me.
Right. Yeah, that's how I feel too, and that's
just
how
be respectful about it. That's the main thing.
I think that's a pretty fair, I think it's a pretty fair statement. I think anybody who has a logical mind can agree with that. Okay, so now we're moving into the Canadian UFO. I've been wanting to talk about this one for a while. This is one that even before we started looking into it, I thought, I usually have I'm not going to lie, folks, I usually have a tendency to sway towards believing in the extraterrestrial kind of stuff, because I truly do feel like there's no way that we're alone in this universe, and I feel like the evidence, especially as far as Roswell was concerned, and other sightings like that, it was just too compelling, But this one I always thought was, I don't know, it's interesting. It's very much up in the air. But
the most interesting thing about it is the Guardian himself, this mysterious, or herself, this mysterious figure who just sent this tape to somebody, with this fingerprint on it. If you ask me, I really don't think it happened. I don't think it was real, because why would somebody throw in that fake alien footage in there? And we'll get to that later. But yeah.
Let's get on the diving board and jump up and do a spinning jumbo gyro into this water of Canadian UFO goodness. None of those terms were anything official that I just mentioned, so don't go quoting those to your swimming coach.
Spinning corkscrew.
Yeah, sure. So West Carleton, which is in the province of Ontario, in 1991, one resident had an extraordinary experience. On August 18th, around 10 p.m., Diane Labenek had just put her children to bed. Her husband was out running an errand, and the dogs began to howl. She looked out the window and she saw flames. These were extremely red flames, and it didn't look like a fire, though. It was just standing in one spot. So she's seeing these flames, and then at that same moment, she saw a ship just kind of come down next to the flames, and on top of the ship, she saw a blue flashing light, and on the bottom, there was also a flashing light. The ship went a little went back a little bit to the back of the trees and then disappeared, and then all the flames went out at the same time. The flames just blinked out when the ship flew away. It didn't enter her mind to phone the police, because she thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to tell them? I just saw, this strange ship and blah, blah, blah. What are they going to say? Okay, Diane, that's fine. Someone will be out there soon. So she didn't really want to call the cops. 10 minutes after the lights blinked out and the ship left, a helicopter appeared just out of nowhere unexpectedly. And it was, one of your typical black unmarked helicopters, tinted window type dealios. Just one of those freaky black choppers that just like, what the fuck is this? Who does this belong to? After crisscrossing the area, the chopper flew over her house and into the night. The next day, Diane went to the field searching for evidence of the previous night's events. So she took the opposite approach of the guy from Bentwater. She wanted to find proof. The 1991 sighting was the second unusual event Diane witnessed in West Carleton, because in 1989, residents had witnessed a burst of light over a nearby swamp. Diane might have remained silent about the 1991 episode had it not been for a tape that was sent to Bob Exler, who lives in Maine in the United States, in February of 1992. A former NASA mission specialist, Exler is now a well-known UFO researcher. The tape, which is a VHS tape that Mike probably owns because he collects a bunch of VHS tapes.
I wish I had that tape.
Yeah, I know, right?
That'd be pretty cool.
The tape itself only had this like neon sticker type label on it, and it had a thumbprint that, you know, obviously someone stuck their thumb in ink and then put the print on the neon green label.
That's so ballsy,
right?
To just you know, fingerprint, you know, on there. Catch me if you can.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well put a middle finger on there, too. I mean, that's pretty much what you're insinuating with the fingerprints. Like, yeah, bitch. You know, catch me.
Well, if he doesn't have a criminal record, then it probably would be hard to catch the person with just a fingerprint.
I was so happy for the longest time that the government did not have my fingerprints on file until I got that goddamn DUI like 5 years ago when I was 22. Now my prints are on file, which is just great, because there's a lot of people I wanted to kill. So also beside the thumbprint was the name Guardian, and this is you're gonna hear this name Guardian a lot in this segment. If you took a shot every time they said the name Guardian, you would be dead of alcohol poisoning.
Well, it's a cool name. I mean, you gotta.
Yeah, no, it is. He's guarding us from something. I don't know. Exler was perplexed and popped the tape into his VHS player to realize that this was the same event that Diane Labenek witnessed. They actually show the contents of the tape on Unsolved Mysteries, which is kind of rare that they do that. I guess whenever they have like hardcore evidence, like last week we talked about the Withville UFOs, and they actually played the tape of the guy, even though it wasn't the whole tape, and they kind of cut in and out of it between the scenes, which kind of annoyed me. I wanted to hear the whole unadulterated tape, just like I wanted to see this whole tape too. But I guess they realized that not everyone's going to be into UFOs, and that'd probably just take up too much time, so they just kind of have to edit in the scenes. But so far, it's one of the most convincing pieces of evidence that Exler had seen in his 12 years of UFO research. He had the sense that it was a real event rather than a prop set up in a room somewhere. Now, with this videotape, there was also a bunch of other goodies that got sent along with it. Well, I guess they'd be goodies if they were authentic, and that's yet to be seen. There was a map sent with the videotape showing the area of West Carleton where the UFO encounter had happened. Exler then went to Canada with a fellow researcher, Graham Lightfoot. Together they interviewed Diane Labenek, who Graham Lightfoot had met earlier when interviewing her for the 1989 sighting. So I'm guessing that's why they even mentioned the 1989 sighting, because when I was taking notes, I thought it was I was like, why did they mention that detail out of nowhere, the 89 sighting? But I guess it was to intro Graham Lightfoot later on. To their surprise, Diane described exactly what they had seen on the Guardian videotape, which the videotape showed the ship coming down next to the red flames, but from a different perspective. But it was obviously on Labenek's property. It was just from a different vantage point. So Diane had no idea that this tape had existed. She hadn't seen it or anything like that. So it's kind of like when they came to interview this woman, and she described exactly what happened on tape. Guys, this is before YouTube, this is before Vimeo or any kind of stuff like that, so it's kind of like she would have had to have been directly involved with Guardian for her to know about the contents on the tape, and that's the only way she could have known. There's no other way. So you got to be of one of two trains of thought at this point in the segment. You either have to write this off as a hoax just right now, or you have to be of the belief that, okay, there's somebody named Guardian who had prior knowledge that this UFO was going to be there. See that whole thing. I mean, the guy has prior knowledge that how the hell would you have prior knowledge that a UFO is going to land anywhere or be anywhere, unless you are some extraterrestrial yourself, which creates sort of an interesting potential X-Files segment. Or episode or something. Yeah, but Robert Stack actually had a really good line that he said in that segment regarding that. He said, the key to the entire episode relies heavily on the person named Guardian. The presence of this mysterious information in a remote field late at night with or not information, informant, is what I meant to say. The presence of this mysterious informant in a remote field late at night with a video camera in hand, just in time for a UFO sighting, can't be ascribed to luck.
Yeah,
So
it can't be. There's no way. And plus, all of the extra stuff that's included in the packet just screams to me, "Oh, look, I uncovered it. It really does look like the work of some UFO super fan
right,
who
we'll get into
really
that.
wants to,
So this is one of the clearest videos. Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who is a U.S. Navy physicist, this is one of the clearest videos he has seen depicting an actual object of unknown origin. You could tell by the lighting and the flashes that it was a dome-shaped object. The bright strobing light was particularly intriguing to him because it blinked very fast and it was blue. It blinked much faster than normal aircraft beacon lights. It shows the object appearing over a rise, depicting someone in the field trying to get closer to it. In one scene, which this actually always kind of creeped me out, in one scene you could see the light getting brighter and brighter until you get a diffuse in the camera lens, as if the craft was shining a light right at the person who was videotaping. Yeah. Whew, yeah. Freaky. If that is real. I mean, if you were, recording this thing and all of a sudden it shoots a huge floodlight over to you, it's like, oh, shit, gotta go. Sorry.
I don't want to get anal probe tonight, so I'm gonna head out of here.
Humming. Anytime I can use it, I'm gonna use it. The object was so large, according to what these guys are saying, the object was so large that it would have been very difficult to hoax. I mean, this is what they're saying. They would have had to have brought generators or some kind of apparatus to run this thing. You would have heard noises in the video from said generator and said apparatuses, but the craft itself seemed to be silent. Dr. Robert Nathan of NASA Jet Propulsionary Laboratory, he took a look at this and he could not explain the lights, nor categorically dismiss the tape as a hoax. Ever since this event, large black helicopters have cruised over the area, unmarked with darkly tinted windows. Now, that could all be circumstantial. That doesn't necessarily tie into anything. However, the Canadian government does deny that these helicopters are being used. They said, this isn't us. This isn't a government training exercise. Nothing like that.
Well,
so.
Yeah, Diane Labenek says that these helicopters were flying so low that they blew the shingles off her roof, and that is kind of hard to verify. Because I remember reading something on this other link, which I do recommend anybody who's listening to this to actually check this link out.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It was very informative.
And it says something like, well, these helicopters can't really fly that low, and so without like crashing into something or whatever. I mean, it just seems pretty implausible. Like they don't go that fast. To blow shingles off a roof. That's kind of... Plus, you notice that. But not only would Diane notice it, but pretty much everyone else in the neighborhood would notice it, or in the area. So
Mr. Bob Exler comes back into the play on this segment, and if you can picture a young Elton John back when he was on, like... TV,
the Muppet Show,
like when he had kind of that bowl haircut and the glasses and everything. This is kind of what Bob Exler looks like, a very young Elton John, circa Your Song, or that kind of era in his career. He's saying either A, this is an extraordinary elaborate hoax, B, there's a government training exercise being conducted on private property, or C, it's an unexplained UFO non-human technology. According to Bob Exler, whether the event was real or an elaborate hoax, Guardian had prior knowledge of the event. Guardian is much more involved in this than the evidence suggests, is what Mr. Exler is talking about. Nothing is known about Guardian's true identity. Also, with this package that it contained the videotape and the map, there was purported military documents that arrived that raised serious questions about Guardian's credibility. Now, this is where it starts getting the waters get even murkier as far as the whole thing about this being a real event. Among other preposterous claims, the documents allege far-reaching conspiracies involving UFOs, Red China, and nuclear weapons. Bob Exler called into question the authenticity of the documents. Then a Canadian official, who they also had on the show, just flat out says these papers are fake. And then he says, quote, "Someone with very little effort could have come a lot closer than this." Which, let me just take it. I thought that was so funny. I never paid attention to that sentence until, like, reviewing this again in preparation for this podcast, but this motherfucker says, "Someone with very little effort could have come a lot closer to faking government Canadian documents." So I don't think he was meaning to, but I think he pretty much just put his own country on blast. That
or he just put the guy who faked these on blast. I think that's his whole intention.
I just think it's funny because he's like, yeah, you know, hey, if you want to fake some Canadian government documents, really not that hard, eh? Just just have at it if you want to give it a go. I just offended all of our Canadian listeners. I'm sorry. But yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, no, the official, the Canadian official, he flat out denied it. Yeah, he said, yeah, no, these are fake as hell.
Bunch of hoses created this.
Oh God, come on, Mike, you live closer to Canada than I do. You can do a better accent than that.
I can't really. I suck.
Have I ever asked you if you've been to Canada before?
No, and I never have.
All right, well, that answers that question. Moving on. So, also on this videotape, which I also thought was extremely interesting, also on this videotape, it showed obscure images of what appear to be alien beings. Now, if you can get just like... No. Sound like Squidward. No, SpongeBob. These images... it basically, what it looks like is a very diffused background, like just all black, and it's like the contrast is very sharp. It's like all you see is the white kind of alien face and hands, and then just kind of all black. So like there's no kind of contrast for you to make out a body shape or anything. You just see whites and blacks. That's all you see.
Yeah, and the alien face looks like a mask to me. It looks clearly like a mask.
To which Bob Exler asks, why would somebody contaminate such an authentic event with images of people dressed up in alien outfits?
That's what makes me think it's some elaborate hoax by some UFO superfan who is like super into UFOs, and then got involved with other people who are super into UFOs, and found a way to hoax this video and then hoax these other sightings in order to get in the news or to get their story into the mainstream and available in the UFO community.
Yeah, you got to kind of ask yourself with this, why wouldn't somebody fake it? You know, why wouldn't they try to fake it? If they're faking crop circles for notoriety or to get a rise out of people, why wouldn't they also fake something like this? Now, Diane Labenek, her character comes into play as well, because in the segment, that Graham guy who interviewed her for the '89 encounter, his only thing to go on with Diane as far as her credibility is, once you meet Diane and you just see her, the simple way she lives, you can just tell that she's not someone who's going to make this up. And it's like,
yeah,
that's all you have to go on. That is the only piece of tangible evidence that they have to believe this woman, that she isn't somehow involved in this, is to say, well, just look how she lives. She's a simple farm girl and she just saw this extraordinary thing. But then you relayed some information to me before we started this that made me even more kind of feel like this is a bunch of BS. You were telling me about when they were filming the Unsolved Mysteries segment.
Yeah, this quote from this article on the internet, which is actually a really great article, by the way. It talks about the whole guardian UFO and the CARP case on the Paranormal Zone X website. So, this is the quote. It says, Labenek had told Graham that she knew nothing about UFOs, nor did she care about them or talk about them with anyone. And yet, when the Unsolved Mysteries segment was being taped at her home, one of the grips on the crew, setting up a scene in which the Guardian was mailing a video in Labenek's basement recreation room, found cupboards containing many UFO books.
And you meant recreation room, not recreation room.
Yeah, recreation room.
Yeah, so in her basement, somebody who supposedly cared nothing about UFOs, didn't know about them, didn't care about them, who just happened to see this amazing thing out of her window, now has a bunch of UFO books in her recreation room in the cupboard. You can kind of start to see now how there's something to be gained from this. Getting on TV, I'm sure she was compensated in some form as being because she participated in the recreation, which never happens in the UFO ones. They'll happen in other ones, but it's rare that you see the actual person involved in the story be involved in the recreation that Unsolved Mysteries actually airs. So
she also, according to this link, had more than one sighting. But it was only, these sightings were only mentioned in passing by the investigator, and not very often. So it really questions the credibility of her if she's saying, "Oh, I saw more than one," But then, like, it's just hearsay. It's just what she said. And then the actual guy who was heavily featured, I believe, on this segment, the investigator. There's just so much stuff on this particular Ostler. He is brought into question to me because despite having signed an exclusive with Unsolved Mysteries to not do another show until 30 days after the airing of the Carp case, the Guardian UFO case, Ostler, he records a segment for sightings in January of 1993 without telling Graham until after the fact. Interestingly, Dr. A.J. Quarrington, a witness, participates in sightings after refusing to meet or even discuss the case of Graham and Clive Naden, the former director of MUFON Ontario, in the early stages of investigation.
So what we have here appears to be publicity stunt. Whether it be for monetary purposes or to just kind of get their name out, get their faces seen on TV. Like I said, Diane Labenek participated in the recreation, and she wasn't terrible. I mean, so obviously she's got a flair for acting. So if she can act on camera, maybe she can act in real life. Maybe there was a connection with this Guardian person. Exler, who you called Oxler, just to clarify what that means so you don't get confused. Exler... he goes on Unsolved Mysteries, and then, kind of, I mean, I don't know if you said he signed a contract or something.
Yeah,
breaking his contract, going on another show talking about, so this guy has something to gain, so I think we could pretty much lay the hammer down on this one, that this is bullshit. This is not a credible case, because Exler says even Exler himself says earlier, why would somebody contaminate such vivid evidence of this authentic event with images of people in alien suits? Well, the answer to that is they wouldn't. They wouldn't contaminate such evidence with that kind of shit unless all of it was bullshit. A plus B equals C. If you have fake-ass Canadian government documentation, if you have fake-ass alien sightings or images of aliens on the VHS tape, then obviously C, the event itself was a hoax as well. And I think the only way that they got over on everyone is because they could rely on shitty 90s videotape technology to obscure and blur out everything to where you can't see anything. You can't make out everything. It's the face on Mars syndrome all over again, where they think that there's a face on Mars, but then all it took was sending a high-def camera to Mars to see that it's just a mountain range of no value whatsoever. So I think that would be the case with this videotape too. If it was a 1080p high-def picture of this event that took place in this field, then perhaps you would see a lot more things that would give away the fact, you can see the lighting rig here, you can see and also you have to take into the fact that this happened at night, and you have an object that's giving off a lot of light in contrast to a dark area around it, which would automatically silhouette anything that would be as far as like rigging or anything like that, where you would see anything holding it up or powering or anything. It would instantly cast silhouettes on everything. So I lay my hammer of justice down on this as being bullshit, a bullshit segment. This did not happen. It was still super entertaining as hell. As far as Unsolved Mystery segments goes,
it's still unsolved in the way who the Guardian is. Who is the Guardian?
But
So
it's almost like, who cares? Because it's a,
yeah.
you know, at this point, the Guardian is nothing but a
think it's
troll.
kind of interesting. I think it's kind of interesting, though. It's still kind of be kind of interesting to know who the Guardian is. To the whole sort of, how did he do it? Like, how did he fake this video and all of that? And apparently, Graham Lightfoot himself, he says he met somebody named Andy Williams who claimed to know who the Guardian was. Graham and Oshler, I probably said his name wrong again, Exler, arranged to meet with Williams the next day in Ottawa. Andy Williams explained that a friend of many years named Bobby Charleboy, probably said his last name wrong, had an ongoing interest in UFOs and had called himself Guardian over the course of those years. He went on to give details about Bobby Charleboy and his interests. Eschler inexplicably gave Andy Williams much material regarding to the Carp case. And on November 22nd, Graham discovered that a coworker knew Bobby Charleboy well, and his sister Meg had dated the Guardian suspect. Graham talked with Meg, and she confirmed that Charleboy was an avid UFO buff and had discussed the phenomenon in many discussions in many occasions in the past. So that's a pretty much a prime suspect there, is this Bobby Charleboy.
Yep. So, I mean, you know, you have a suspect. You know, I would now start looking in the direction of, you know, how is this guy affiliated with Labenek? Because I feel like there would be some kind of an affiliation. I mean, the fact that she does live in this kind of open field, out of the way of anybody who might even witness somebody trying to hoax something. I don't know. The pieces just fit so much easier for this being a hoax and it being real. Unlike Roswell, unlike the Allagash abductions, to where it's like, or the Withville, Kentucky, you know, where it's just too much.
Or the Belgian UFO.
Right, and pretty much any of the other UFOs.
Or the Mexican, you know, Mexico City UFOs.
Or the Bentwaters UFO. Pretty much any segment, you know, that we've gone over has way more evidence to the contrary of it being a hoax. But this one is the opposite. This is too much in the hoax department for my liking. So that, you know, I'm laying it down that this to me is definitely a hoax. So
I agree. When I first saw the segment and I saw the whole, you know, fake aliens pictures and just the absurd lengths that the Guardian went to try to add credibility to the videotape, but really he discredited the whole thing. It was just very unprofessional.
Yeah, this whoever Guardian is, he's not too bright. He was excited. It was the 90s. It was a more simpler time. People were more, you know, open to believing this kind of stuff. So, you know, it is what it is.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was some remote control thing that he found a way to create something out of old plane, you know, remote control plane parts or something, and, you know, set that up and it flew it around the sky. And because the kid, and I know people, it looks so big. Yeah, it looks big. They could have just zoomed in.
Right. People's perceptions are a very weak thing, as they've stated before on Unsolved Mysteries.
I would love to see this video resurface again and then have it analyzed today.
Right. All right, so moving on, our final segment that we're talking about is unfortunately something that is real, that did actually happen. Yeah. It's called, on the Ultimate Collection, it's known as Richard's Rampage. This kid's a little fucking bastard.
He is. At the same time, though, it's so tragic. I mean, I'm not one of those people, oh, yeah, I feel so bad for him. No, I mean, he did do some horrific acts of violence and murder, but at the same time, it does show mental illness and how it's unpredictable and how people can at one point seem to be normal and then the mental illness will occur. They'll have a mental breakdown and then they'll do horrific acts, and then it is tragic. It's one of those things where this is a case of severe mental illness, and who knows what might. Maybe if he was diagnosed beforehand, maybe some of these things might have never happened, but maybe they still would have happened. So it's just tragic for both, all the way around, for the killer and for his victims.
So, at the beginning of this story here, Ray and Ruth Ann Ritter grew up in Woodstock, Illinois, a small town north of Chicago. They were married in 1968 and had 3 children. The Ritters were a close-knit family. When 15-year-old daughter Colleen began to date a childhood friend named Rick Church, it only seemed natural. They both went to a small Catholic school, and at first their relationship seemed like a typical teenage infatuation. Colleen was quoted by saying, "Rick was real quiet. He was real good looking. He was involved in sports. He had a lot of friends." She kind of, for God's sakes, the girl went through some horrible shit, but she kind of seemed like the kind of girl where the lights was on but no one was home kind of girl. She just, I don't know. And I'm not saying like it seems like she has brain damage or has any kind of mental deficiency. She just doesn't come across as that bright to me. The fact that you would date a guy and then your reasons are he was good looking, he was involved in sports, he had a lot of friends. This is probably a chick that I would not have gotten along with in high school. That's neither here nor there, though. When Rick went to college, the romance began to cool in Colleen's eyes. Then it goes back to a scene where Robert Stack's like walking down the stairs, and I love how he delivers this next line. He goes, "The waning of young love is an everyday occurrence. Most teenage hearts mend quickly. However, in Rick and Colleen's case, something went wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong. Rick would call Colleen every night from his college dorm room. No one could have expected that Rick Church was coming unhinged." Oh, beautiful, yeah. Robert Stack. Beautiful.
It really was. It was great.
Very nice, Robert. Oh, perfect delivery. Rick, they go and show a scene where Rick would call Colleen, and Rick's in his dorm room, and Colleen's at her parents' house in the kitchen. And Colleen's like, at first Rick's like, "Hey, how's it going? What's up?" And she's like, "Fine." And then they're just kind of sitting there, and she's like, "Well, I'm going to let you go." And he's like, "What? I just wanted to talk to you for a little bit." And she goes, "But you never have anything to say." And then Rick goes, "That's not true." And then she goes, I really got to go and study." And then Rick goes, "Fine, good luck on your math test."
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
I don't know if that's how it really went down or if that's how they reenacted it, but I thought that was kind of funny because, she's like, "You just don't have anything to say." "That's not true."
Whoa.
I gotta go study. "Fine, good luck on your math test."
Good luck on your math test.
So, in June of 1988, Rick came home from college to find that his parents had separated and his girlfriend had reached a decision. So then it shows them in the truck, like on the side of this wheat field or cornfield. And I actually thought it was a really well-shot scene. And it shows her in the truck with Rick going, "I think we need to see other people." And he's like, "What? Why?" And she's like, "You're just too controlling, So, the beginning of that summer, he, according to Colleen, the beginning of that summer, he became very possessive, "Where are you going? Who are you going to be with?" It was really hard breaking up with Rick. I still wanted to be friends. We had known each other our whole lives, but it was just kind of a friendship that turned into a romance, and it just didn't work out, Like, they tried, maybe dating would work, and it just didn't in her eyes.
So she put him in the friend zone.
Oh, she friend zoned his ass hard. So 2 months later, on the night of Saturday, August 30th, Rick called Colleen at 11:30 p.m. and he was upset and he wanted one last Saturday night with Colleen. He sounded very depressed and he was very silent, and this is according to Colleen. He was very silent, like he knew something that he didn't want to tell her. Colleen said, "Look, if you're going to act like this, then I don't want to talk to you." And then he hung up on her, which she didn't think was unusual because they would hang up on each other all the time. Back when they were dating, they'd have fights. She'd hang up on him. He'd hang up on her, blah, blah, blah. Then the scene, the big point in this story where it all changes. The whole tone of the story changes. It goes from like, okay, I see what's going on, to what?
Yeah.
And as you kind of mentioned this before, but this scene is just shot perfect. This is a 10 out of 10 as far as the music, the narration. It's just, I just can't...
The cinematography, the lighting.
Yeah, it was just perfect. It shows the outside of their house and it's nighttime.
It looks like something out of John Carpenter's Halloween. It really does.
Yeah, and to picture the music, it's doing that Unsolved Mysteries thing where something dramatic's gonna happen, like in the reenactment itself, and they're not just kind of narrating over some facts of the case. It's like they're setting up a scene for this reenactment to take place right in front of your eyes. So they're doing that very kind of almost like a heartbeat type percussion. It's like doom 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 with a very sparse piano over the top of it, you know, making this very creepy, ominous vibe.
Great horror film type music.
Yeah. It's pitch black outside of the house, and then the camera cuts to the side of the house, and you just see Rick just kind of stalking alongside of the house. And so then, as Rick starts to go up the steps in kind of the back of the house, in the back like patio area, Rick starts to go up the stairs, and the music cuts. Robert Stack's voice cuts in and says, around 5:15 a.m., Rick Church entered the Ritter's house. What happened next was based on evidence and eyewitness accounts. Ray and Ruth Ann Ritter were asleep in their downstairs bedroom. By 5:25 a.m., they were both dead. And it just shows Rick as he's walking into the bedroom, and then that narration kicked in. Upstairs, 11-year-old Matthew Ritter awoke. He was stabbed twice. In that scene, Rick's walking up the stairs, and all you see is this black silhouette, and it's kind of showing it from over Matthew's shoulder as you see the silhouette of Rick walk up the stairs and just stab the little brother. Colleen got awoken by all this, and she frantically dialed 911. Rick broke into the room. She ran. Rick never spoke. He began to stab Colleen. He had a cedar...
Yeah, that was like the scariest thing, you know, he didn't speak.
Yeah.
That's a total representation of mental breakdown. And some people, they do speak when they have a mental breakdown, but some don't. They completely shut down. And then whatever sort of dark thoughts or inhibitions they might have had are completely unleashed because they don't have control over their bodies and their actions anymore.
There was a cedar chest. I was just lying on the cedar chest playing dead, but he kept attacking me. He just kept stabbing me. So then I tried yelling out, "I love you," thinking that would make him stop. Then Colleen ran out into the street screaming, "Help me, help me," when Rick was in hot pursuit. Rick fled when two neighbors came to Colleen's aid. Inside the house, Matthew had managed to give his address to a 911 operator. Operating under the false impression that Rick had run back into the Ritter house, when the police arrived, they concentrated their search efforts inside the house. Matthew was huddled with his friend upstairs, bloody and in shock, but he was okay. Colleen's friend was also unharmed. Downstairs, they found the bodies of Colleen's parents. Meanwhile, Rick was back at his house hurriedly packing his things. By 5:45 a.m., Rick had already taken his mom's truck and vanished. Less than half an hour had elapsed since the bloody attack on the family.
I mean, the whole way the attack scene is shot and edited, you could have replaced Rick with Michael Myers, and it would have had the same, you know, same effect and the same impact. It was just so well shot.
They were hitting their stride with by the time this segment came out. I mean, they were really kind of stepping up their game as far as the show was concerned.
Very cinematic looking segment.
So they cut to the one of the detectives, and they go, "This was a kid who went to school here his whole life, not like some kind of criminal. It was totally out of character for someone like this. You know, speculation is the breakup, but to do something like this, that's really something." That's what the guy says.
Yeah, he definitely had some sort of mental issues that were not diagnosed, or he didn't really get taken care of. And the stress of having his parents break up and then also losing his girlfriend, I think that's what caused him to go over the edge. And the dog apparently over the edge as well.
Oh, you heard that? Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that's my stupid dog Lenny, everyone. If anyone wants him, you can have him. Oh my god. Shut up! I don't know if I should leave this in or not. I just let people into my life. At the hospital, Colleen and Matthew were put under constant guard in case Rick returned. Colleen was critically injured with 26 stab wounds to the back of her head. They thought that she might not be able to see, that she had brain damage, but I mean, I guess she didn't. I mean, She seemed fine in the interview segment, but I'll get more on how I feel about her, like, in more so at the end of this. 2 days later, Colleen's parents were buried. She was incredibly emotionless about her parents' death, as far as I felt. She seemed very blasé. I don't know if that's a coping mechanism for her, but usually when they have people on these shows, they'll start crying, like, in the middle of talking about it, or you see them getting emotional, or you see them react in some way. She was like, yeah, my parents were buried when I was in the hospital, and it kind of sucked because, you know, they were like my best friends, and like I really, you know, just kind of sucked that I couldn't say goodbye, you know. But I said goodbye my own way. That's kind of how she delivered the line, and I'm just like, dude, this is your parents' death, and you're just talking about it like you missed a field trip or something. Like, I was.
Yeah, some people, they deal with death differently than others.
Yeah, I guess that's how she dealt with it, man, because I guess her way of dealing with it was not dealing with it, because she came across incredibly calm and collected about that. So,
or maybe she just deals with it her own way. You know, maybe she already grieved and she already cried over it and decided it was better for her and her life, and to not let that, you know, bother her or you know, devastate her. And, you know, some people can do that and other people can't. And I actually commend the people who are able to do that, to not let that sort of tragedy completely just destroy their lives and, you know, things like that.
I feel like it's the mental constructs in the person's mind that were there beforehand, though. I feel like this girl was very happy-go-lucky and probably not what you would call an intellectual type before this happened, so maybe it was easier for her to cope. Like me, on the other hand, I feel like I would just be devastated about that for years after the fact, even talking about it. So I mean, but that's because my mental kind of brain makeup is different, you know. I'm very introspective and I think very deeply about things and obsess about things, and that's probably not a good thing. So I kind of envy her in certain aspects. So 3 years after fleeing the murder scene, Rick Church was arrested. Yes, they caught him. When he was spotted in a fast food restaurant by a Salt Lake City police officer. Church pleaded guilty in exchange for the jury not seeking the death penalty. He's serving a life sentence in an Illinois prison now. I mean, I don't know how I feel about the death penalty, if I'm being 100% honest. It's like, I'd like to think that we shouldn't, like, an eye for an eye isn't the best way.
I mean, that's kind of the Dark Ages sort of approach.
I mean,
burn them at the stake type thing.
Yeah, but then when you hear about shit like this, it's kind of like, yeah, burn that bastard. You know, it's one of those things.
Yeah, I can see the argument against and for it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of neutral on the death penalty.
That's why I stay very in the middle on that, because until something happens to me, I don't want to go around talking about like I know. Because I think that's one of those things that you really have to be put in that position before you can be for or against taking someone else's life for them doing doing you wrong in some kind of way, you know. But the bastard is in jail, and I highly doubt he'll ever get out for such a horrendous crime. Always weird that these people, like, they get obsessed, they act out these horrific things, and then they like snap out of their whatever was, like, you know, making them crazy.
That's what a mental breakdown, you know, that's what can happen with mental illness. And that's what's so scary about it, is that even the person who commits these crimes, you know, wasn't very cognizant of what they were doing when they did these things. They just snap out of it and then, oh my God, what did I do type thing.
Right.
I mean, that's horrifying. That's horrible. That's why I feel bad for some of these. I mean, it's one of those things that if it is a confirmed diagnosis of mental illness, and we don't really necessarily know that for sure with Rick, but I think that is the case with how it happened. I mean, he doesn't say anything, and then it seems to appear that he kind of snaps out of it later. But he did also kind of get away. But, I mean, really, he probably would have known. He's covered in blood. I mean, once he snaps out of it, then he realizes, oh, fuck, what did I do? I better get out of here type deal, you know.
Which
Yeah,
shows criminal, which kind of to me shows criminal intent, because it's like you knew you did so. It's like you know the difference between right and wrong at that point. That's why you fled.
Oh yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I mean, who wants to be? It's interesting. It's like, did he know what he was doing or didn't he? I kind of want to know if he stood trial and was deemed not mentally competent or something like that, or he was deemed competent enough to stand trial. Obviously, he was deemed competent enough to stand trial because he got convicted, right? So, is this really a case of mental illness, or is this a case of just some fucking psycho guy who, well, at the time, mental illness is also, there is the psychotic sort of aspect is tied into mental illness. So,
to me, this guy
tendencies the whole time.
It's like there's so many cases. I mean, okay, the case of the obsessive boyfriend going overboard and harming either the girlfriend or the girlfriend's family. I mean, that's an all too familiar tragic story, and
the way he does it though is so
right. It's so over the top. It is so over the top, man. Like killing her fucking parents. I mean, usually they go after the girl. Usually they have no interest in anybody but the girl. You know,
that's what makes you think that he was in some sort of daze or something.
I don't know, dude.
And the fact that she said "I love you" and tried to get him this, and he didn't say anything. That kind of ties into the thing that there was something wrong with him mentally when he committed these crimes. Because if he was completely all there, wouldn't he have some sort of response to that?
Right.
The woman he apparently loves and is the reason why he did this, and he has no response to her whatsoever.
Probably because he knew that she was just saying it, you know, which again showed that he had enough cognizance to know that too, you know, that you're not being truthful, you don't really love me.
But he didn't say that though. He wasn't. He just stayed silent. That's the thing.
Well, either way, this dirtbag
absolutely
deserved to pay for his
what he got.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of whether you had a mental breakdown and did it or not, you still did it.
Everybody has choices in life, you know. Everybody has choices.
Yeah.
And he made his choices, and I mean, not only did he fuck up Colleen's life, I mean, by her getting stabbed and shit, but I mean, like, she had another brother that they didn't even talk about in the segment who, you know, that guy, and who was away apparently, so he has to find out about his parents dying because of his sister's crazy ex, and God, what a horrible situation.
And then think about Rick's parents and his family. They have to deal with that too. That, you know, they're, you know, the member of their family, you know, that his parents who probably raised him and didn't even think he was even capable of this, you know.
Yeah.
Just realizing, oh my God, what did he do? Well, why did he do that? And then that whole you're constantly questioning yourself and what happened? Why did this happen? And yeah, it's bad for both sides. It's tragic. It's tragic for both sides. And I think, and I don't think the side of the murderer gets enough sort of exposure when it comes to, you know, how the tragedy of it all and everything. I mean, it's really easy to just forget about that, but I tend to try to think about it both sides and the impact that it has on both sides. And it's devastating for both sides. It isn't more devastating for one side as it is for the other. It's both devastating for both of them. It's just awful all the way around.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm going to start a new thing here. I deem Rick Church as the Uncovering Unsolved Mysteries podcast asshole douchebag of the week.
Yeah.
Next week there'll be
an argument against that.
Next week there'll be a new candidate from one of the other segments that either tries to offer a weak explanation for something paranormal or does something like this or whatever it may be. But Rick Church is the ass douchebag of the week. But you know, they got him. Justice was served, but it's fucking unfortunate as shit. Feel bad for them. Hopefully they moved on.
They'll never bring back, you know, the parents. I mean, that's the thing, you know, justice being served is only provides so much relief, because that hole was always going to be there, and that's the thing. That's
Hopefully they had friends and relatives around him and a support system. I mean, like I said, Colleen, she seems like she's gonna bounce back from stuff.
oh yeah.
I don't know about the son. I mean, God, that kid lost his parents at such a critical age. You know, imagine losing your parents at 11. Jesus,
Yeah.
be awful, awful. But man, my back is sufficiently sweaty from sitting in this computer chair, and we were
So is mine. So yeah.
we were clocking in at around 2 hours here. This is by far the longest one that we've done, although it might be shorter after I edit out some of the some of the stuff in here, the guffaws and whatnot, gaffes.
Or stuff that doesn't even really tie into what we were talking about. But yeah.
Yeah, I like my dog barking. I don't know. I might leave him in there, so he can have a national platform for his message of bark, bark, bark. I'm here, bark, bark. But
yeah, I don't have anything else to say about this case.
besides the tragedy of it, sorry we ended on such a low note this week.
Yeah, sorry.
Turned out. So yeah, like I said, we have a Facebook page. You can find us on there, Uncovering Unsolved Mysteries. It might not be up there at first. I don't know how it works. I remember when I started a Facebook page for another thing, it took a while for it to actually come up, so I don't know how that works. But thank you for the continued listenership on all the other platforms out there, the Stitchers and the Podbeans and the YouTubes and the SoundClouds and all that stuff. We really appreciate it. This podcast just continues to grow, and that's always a good thing because you feel like you're doing something right. You can find Mike on his YouTube channel, youtube.com/OCP Communications. You can find me at youtube.com/dancing with ghosts and the number 2. And I think I've gotten some subscribers from this podcast, so that's a cool thing.